Thanks, boy genius.
No problem, dumbass. Remember cartoon crossovers? It's weird, I feel like we never see them done anymore, at least not in the scale they once were. You got The Simpsons and the Critic crossover, the Steven Universe Uncle Grandpa one that made everybody really mad but I actually think is really funny, or the Family Guy Simpsons special. I like to forget about that one. The last one I can really remember happening on a larger scale was the Supernatural Scooby-Doo event. But even then, one of those shows wasn't even animated. I'm not sure why studios don't see much value in doing these as much anymore. Perhaps it's a result of most shows now getting cancelled after 1 or 2 seasons, and so they can't guarantee both shows will still be on the air by the time of its release. Boy, I sure do love the current state of the animation industry. But if you're not a platform fighter or cheaply made chibi shorts with no voice acting, ew, then you're not going to be seeing many crossovers in this day and age. Which is a shame, because they're cool. I mean, do I even need to explain why? It's fun and exciting to see characters that you never thought could ever meet come together to share screen time, getting to explore each other's worlds. For a kid, it makes you feel like anything is possible. It's insane. Those 2 shows that I watch, at least for a short period of time, are allowed to become one. And none blew me away more than the Timmy Power Hours, which saw the main characters of the Fairly OddParents and the Adventures of Jimmy Neutron, Boy Genius, god you couldn't have picked a shorter name, swapping dimensions and having to find a way to get back home.
Jimmy Neutron, Boy Genius, Timmy Turner.
In my opinion, Nickelodeon in the mid-2000s were the kings of crossing over their many iconic franchises. Of course, we have the holy grail of cartoon crossovers, the Nicktoons Unite saga, which saw SpongeBob, Danny Phantom, Jimmy Neutron, and Timmy Turner, sometimes more, Timmy also got fucked in the last one, banding together to take down either their respective villains or an entirely new threat that wants to take over the multiverse. One of my favorite aspects of that series was how they didn't reset between games. You know, once all these guys were introduced to each other, they continued to be aware of their existence, even filling in some of the newer Nicktoons that were introduced as the series continued.
Look, it's Timmy Turner! Look, it's Jimmy Neutron!
Jimmy Hootron?
Oh, he's a friend of ours. We go way, way back.
But that all started with the Timmy Power Hour, which aired on Nickelodeon in 2004. Sponsored by Cheetos for some reason. Not a whole lot is known about the behind-the-scenes development of this incredibly ambitious project, with the Fairly OddParents creator Butch Hartman claiming that the executives of Nickelodeon at the time specifically requested it, which was cool. You know, because of how obsessed I was with Nicktoons Unite at the time, I assumed that soon Nick would be releasing a crossover between SpongeBob and Danny Phantom to go along with it. But it never came. I can only assume Nick saw massive potential in this project due to the similarities between both shows. They're both polar opposites, but somehow managed to blend perfectly. You know, Timmy, Jimmy, one has magic, the other has science, one is 2D, the other's 3D. Sometimes the best ideas come from the oddest of places. Fairly Oddest, but this seemed like a massive undertaking, with both shows presumably being made under completely different pipelines. But I think what works so well about them is that they managed to use that to their advantage. Instead of trying to blend these 2 disparate series together, they instead embraced their differences, and chose to have it be more of a celebration of the 2 rather than a combining. Despite being, well, 2 years old, I fucking loved the Timmy Power Hour. And clearly I wasn't alone in that, with it doing so well that Nick not only ordered an immediate sequel, but also a threequel, resulting in a final special that, almost, acted as a finale to the Fairly OddParents. Didn't happen though, and so, fittingly, today I wanted to have a power hour of my own. I've had to train myself to not say par to discuss in excruciating detail each and every one of these crossovers. Do they hold up as well as I remember? Are there elements that have aged poorly? Does Timmy still look horrible in 3D? The answer to all these questions is... yes. Psst, subscribe to the Sleep Channel for epic compilations to relax and sleep to. Thanks. Also subscribe, I appreciate it. You know, I really wish there were more info about these specials online. Jimmy Neutron is in a strange place where its creators, Keith Alcorn and John A. Davis, are nowhere near the level as well known as someone like Butch Hartman. Maybe not for good reasons, albeit, but they seem so low profile comparatively. And so all we really have to go off of is Butch Hartman's word. And upon checking out his behind the scenes video on his YouTube channel, I was reminded of exactly what compelled me to make that rant video when I was 16. And it's that these videos have no fucking substance whatsoever. I've met Butch in person a couple times, one of those being for the interview I did. And one thing I certainly picked up on is that getting a detailed story from the man is near impossible. Like him or not, Butch has been involved in the animation industry for years, and by far has had the most extensive career out of anyone at Nickelodeon. You think he would have a plethora of cool and interesting stories to tell about the inner workings of having multiple shows on the air, during arguably Nickelodeon's peak. But no, everything is told in the most quick, safest way possible, like he's talking PR to you. Oh hey Butch, what was it like working on this thing? Oh, you know, it was a great project, everyone on it was super talented and amazing. It was a tough job and we had some complications, but it came out great and people loved it. Thanks. It's just like, I want to know more. How was it working with the Jimmy Neutron staff? How much of a challenge was it translating Timmy to 3D? What was the working environment like at Nickelodeon at the time? But you watch through his video and all he really says is, yep, we were told to make a crossover, it was cool, and everybody loved it. Yeah, thanks, I know that already.
Science and magic.
Yeah, Jimmy's into science, he's into magic. I mean, what would we idiots? We have to do this. And so we just kind of started talking, and when they threw it by the network, they're like, we should do that.
Wait, what? But dude, in your fucking video you said...
And one day, this word comes down from on high.
We'd like you to combine your show, The Fairly Odd Parents, with The Jimmy Neutron Show. Have a nice day.
Fucking liar, I don't know what to believe anymore. Anyways, the hype for this was insane. They were promoting the shit out of it. And you bet your ass they made a crappy Flash game to go along with it. Hell yeah. Anyways, with the first Jimmy Timmy Power Hour, I always thought it was really clever that they treated it less like a crossover and more of a switching realities gimmick. You know, what if Jimmy was in Timmy's place and Timmy was in Jimmy's place, having to deal with each other's usual problems? They set it all up in a pretty genius way too. And by genius, I mean simple, but hey, it works. With the upcoming Dimsdale Science Fair, Timmy, who still has yet to start his project, decides to wish himself in the greatest lab in the universe, which just so happens to be the lab of Jimmy Neutron. Which never really made sense to me because I always assumed they were from different universes, but whatever, if we want to pick apart the logic of the Nicktoons universe, I think you're watching this for the wrong reasons. After accidentally grabbing Timmy's auto poofer, which he's always had on person in every episode since the pilot, Jimmy is transported to the world of the Fairly Odd Parents, in which we just kind of forget about him for a bit. The story cleverly keeps the two worlds pretty separate. Once Jimmy is in Dimsdale, he's restricted to his own plot, and vice versa. Trying to find a way to combine these two worlds would have been way too much work to cover, and so I think it's smart that, in a way, both of these could cut together to create two standalone episodes of each other's show. You know, if you spliced all the Jimmy parts together and spliced all the Timmy parts together, it's almost like they could have released this as two special event episodes for each series. Like, what happened to Jimmy when he disappeared? Well, now you gotta watch the Fairly Odd Parents to find out. That would have been a fucking nightmare for reruns, though. Good they didn't go with that. The purpose of this special is more so to see each show's main character interact with the world of the other. And so we get to see Timmy explore Retroville and hang out with Jimmy's friends, while Jimmy is just kind of stuck on his own. I like that because of the switch-up, we get to see Timmy experience what it's like to be around normal, non-Butch Hartman-written individuals who have more than one character trait. Whereas Jimmy gets the opposite treatment. He gets to now assume Timmy's position, getting ignored by his parents, dealing with Vicky and all his classmates who are more obnoxious than ever, along with Mr. Crocker, who obviously notices that something is up, stealing his invention and using it to finally transport him to Fairy World. I can't believe such a major moment happened in the fucking Jimmy Neutron crossover. But comparatively, Timmy gets a pretty chill day out of it. Hanging out with Carl and Sheen, Cindy falls in love with him. It's only by the end when things start to fuck up with him installing a video game into Goddard that corrupts him, turning him into a giant monster who grows stronger with every defeat. I like that even in the Fairly Odd Parents world, Timmy's game is CG for some reason. Imagine if your video game looked better than real life. Oh.
I'm a fucking bad bitch at this game, son. Oh, god damn, the screen went black.
Also, I have to not question how Timmy's playing on what's clearly a Game Boy, yet the game is on a disc. It was always so dumb to me that nobody, except for Cindy, I guess, was able to tell that this wasn't Jimmy and that this wasn't Timmy. I guess it only goes to show the similarities in both of these series, writing half the secondary cast to be dumbasses. But even then, I think they somewhat get away from it. It doesn't take away from anything. You know, these are both characters who have previously turned themselves into a variety of stupid shit before, so it's not terribly out of the ordinary. Other than that, though, Goddard becoming a monster and Crocker invading Fairy World, most of this special is just allowing the characters to interact. Ironically, Timmy and Jimmy are the ones to get the least amount of screen time together. But can you imagine if this wasn't a 44-minute special and was restricted to being 22 or hell, even 11 minutes? I can't imagine it would be anywhere near as well remembered. I mean, just look at that OKKO crossover where he, Garnet from Steven Universe, Raven from Teen Titans Go, and Bantan from Bantan joined forces to save the Tooniverse. Despite the creator wanting it to be longer, the network would only give them 11 minutes. And so the entire thing, while cool, feels incredibly rushed like a proof of concept. There's no time to breathe. That's why I don't think we'll ever get anything on this kind of level again. Networks just aren't interested. Now that I think about it, though, it might be because every show now is just direct to streaming, and so if one show is bought by Netflix and then the other show gets dumped on HBO Max, which network will get the crossover? I don't know. Anyways, by far the most exciting prospect of having these shows crossover would have to be the animation. These two art styles couldn't be any more different. And so I'm sure it created major complications during production. It's probably why they decided to keep things small and only have the main characters switch worlds. Therefore, they only have to make a model of Timmy and a model sheet for Jimmy, that's it. Jimmy looks perfect in the Fairly OddParents art. He was translated to their style excellently, which means there's no way in hell Butch designed it.
My arms! My depth! It's gone!
Did you see how he reimagined other shows for a potential Jimmy Timmy Power Hour 4 he made for YouTube? Ugh.
And then Timmy, of course, I thought would just be a cute little bear.
Yeah, bear, not a beaver. There it is, Butch, I drew it for you. And look, there's you, just for fun. But yeah, Jimmy does not look out of place at all. Timmy, on the other hand. Okay, so the Jimmy Neutron team clearly had the tougher job here, having to translate Timmy's design with his extremely cartoony proportions to the world of 3D. And look, we can all agree it looks weird and kinda ugly, but at the same time, for all the bad I can say, I don't know, I kinda like it. Obviously, the biggest hurdles they had to cross here were characters' eyes, mouths, and body shapes, something that the Jimmy Neutron team did not exclusively struggle with. I mean, just look at the live-action movies. But it took us until, like, a week ago to finally get Fairly OddParents characters that look good in 3D. That head shape is naturally just something hard to translate. Some could argue they didn't bother translating him at all. You know, they just made him in 3D as literally as possible based off his initial design instead of trying to get him to conform to the Jimmy art style. But I wouldn't agree with that at all. Really, the only thing that would give me that impression are his giant bulging eyes and eyebrows. The fact that their eyes come out of their head is a lot more noticeable when they're as big and squinty as Timmy's. Along with the fact that they still didn't bother giving him actual shoes, still opting for that weird pants thing Timmy wears. I don't even know how I would describe that. But you know, they evidently did make an effort to have him conform to the art style. Whether or not they succeeded, though, is up to you.
We've got to scour this town of evil.
You spend it. I get it. You want to play one of those special games, eh?
What? They made him less sharp, you know, his hat droops over more. They bothered giving him proper irises and 5 fingers. Honestly, the thing that looks most off about him to me would have to be the colors. In promotional artwork, he looks fine, but in the actual episode, he's way too desaturated. His skin is so pale, and the colors don't pop nearly as much as they should.
See, Cindy, you'd still like me even if I weren't smart, wouldn't you? Of course not.
Wait, did you see that? Editor, play it again. No.
You'd still like me even if I weren't smart, wouldn't you?
What is going on there? It feels like I'm blinking. Slow it down.
Wouldn't you?
Huh. Anyways, I still think they did as good a job as they could of adapting him. Some would argue his mouth is a dead giveaway, but I think that's to forget that this is a mouth style that Jimmy Neutron characters have unfortunately had before. Just look at this freak. Even then, while Jimmy Neutron has admittedly aged pretty poorly visually, I still think it was incredibly impressive for the time, and the team consistently used it to show off what couldn't be done in 2D, like how much they loved their spinning camera shots by the end. Even better, I can tell exactly who's responsible for this, as a couple of years back, one of the animators shared their work on this special, and what do you know, there it is. This is super cool to see. You know what though, I'll never fucking get over how at the end, Timmy comes out of Goddard's mouth, but we get a close-up shot of it, and there's no hole. Where the fuck did he come out of? I think what the Jimmy Timmy Power Hour does best, however, is managing to show off both of these shows at the same time, while still not sacrificing the voice of either. The Jimmy Neutron segments still feel like Jimmy Neutron, while the Fairly OddParents segments still feel like Fairly OddParents. That may seem like such a non-point to bring up, but may I again draw your attention to The Simpsons guy, which was so clearly written by the Family Guy staff, and therefore, all the Simpsons characters just feel kinda off. We have Homer basically just being Peter too. We have uncomfortable scenes like Lisa being shown a string of cuts down Meg's arm. Do I need to mention the Rick joke? Hell, half of the Simpsons secondary cast weren't even in the crossover because their voice actor flat out refused to take part. I think a large part of this would have to go towards the sound design. They did a really good job at keeping each of their vibes alive, especially in the scenes where we see them talking to each other from their respective worlds. You know, we'll have Guy Moon sound effects cutting back from... Okay, who composed for Jimmy Neutron? See, this is what I'm talking about. Why do we know so much more about Fairly OddParents? Charlie Brissett. I'll sing it from the rooftops if I have to. I like the cue to the Oh Yeah Cartoons pilot when Cosmo and Wanda introduce themselves to Jimmy.
I'm Cosmo! And I'm Wanda! And we're
I'm not one for mindless references being shoved into media, but the one exception I have is for crossovers, in which, go all out. That's the point. I've talked about it a bit before, but when I was growing up, Nickelodeon were rarely airing Jimmy Neutron, and so I was largely exposed to the series from these crossover episodes. But really, while watching, I only really knew about Fairly OddParents. Jimmy, Carl, and Sheen may as well have been Butch's own creations in my mind. So after finally having watched some of the series, I can now say that I'm really impressed with just how much of each show they managed to shove in. It must have been really cool as a kid getting to see Timmy Turner interacting with all Jimmy's inventions from previous episodes and even the movie. And seeing Jimmy talking to Cosmo and Wanda and going to Timmy's school was incredibly fun. I love when introducing himself he always has to say his full name.
I'm Jimmy Neutron. No, Jimmy Neutron. I'm Jimmy Neutron.
But there's a bunch of stuff I picked up on here, like the car that Vicky drives him in being the same one she steals from Timmy's dad in that one episode. Pretty sure this is also the first time we learn about the big wand, which powers all the magic in Fairy World. This started to appear a few more times in the rest of the series before being forgotten about. I think they pull something out of their ass later like, oh, it turns out that Crocker's the one powering Fairy World because he believes in fairies. Yeah, like that's not a fucking dumbass power source. Believing in a species that you're not allowed to let anyone know the existence of. What happens when Crocker drops dead? Answer me that. That's what I thought, asshole. And they even managed to throw in Timmy's long-forgotten catchphrase. Where he'd say, let's get, then some word that applies to the current predicament. I always liked that.
Let's get experimental.
I love this new smart-headed Jimmy.
I often see complaints about this special directed towards Timmy in particular, criticizing how annoying he is. He's pretty antagonistic towards a guy whose lab he just broke into. But I don't know, I think it works. I never liked crossovers where the main characters all become immediate best friends. There's so much more interesting conflicts to come out of them hating each other, having them build up to being friends at the end. Timmy and Jimmy are two incredibly strong personalities, and so it makes sense why they wouldn't like each other. Of course, Timmy wouldn't like a self-proclaimed boy genius, and obviously Jimmy wouldn't like a kid who's used to getting whatever he wants. Also, I'd argue that Timmy's assholishness tendencies are matched equally by Jimmy's pig-headedness. When he finds out Timmy saved Goddard, he's still more than willing to let Cosmo and Wanda die because he sees no value in them. But it works because it all comes together greatly with the ending, where both parties are able to recognize that just because they don't see value in something, that it doesn't mean somebody doesn't. Jimmy understanding that in the same way he can love Goddard, who isn't real, that Timmy can also love Cosmo and Wanda, who he thinks are mere computer programs. And so him deciding to suit up and use his wits to defend Fairy World is a really epic moment, genuinely. Much better than the boss fight they made out of this for Nicktoons Unite, that's for sure.
As long as that machine is draining fairy magic, we can't do anything to him. But we can make fun of his outfit. Nice pants!
The ending to this special is fantastic, with Timmy wishing he and Jimmy could once again switch places, and the two finally getting to meet on equal ground. Made it even more impressive when you find out about how much the two animation teams struggled to get this handshake to work right, with the two shows being animated completely differently.
Jimmy Neutron, boy genius.
Timmy Turner. Boy!
The epilogue is fun too, with Jimmy helping out Timmy by using Goddard for his science project. Although I don't know why she'd be impressed, I'd be fucking terrified if I saw this IRL, just look at him. Couldn't have been that hard to just draw a picture of Goddard, could it? But either way, everything is wrapped up nicely to what was at the time a massive event in cartoon history. There's so much good about this special. The art is so fun to look at, the concept of each character having to solve what the other does on a weekly basis is so fun, and I absolutely love that ending. And that's why I think this is the weakest of the three. Might be a controversial take, but I think the first Jimmy Timmy Power Hour is the worst. But not by much. Overall, I really enjoy all three of these, but I think what seriously hinders the first so much is that pacing issue I hinted at before. There is just too much of a break between each part, and I seriously can't tell why. There's so many moments here where you think they could have swapped over, but just don't. And the Jimmy half definitely gets it the worst. You really get the idea that this is more of a Fairly OddParents episode over Jimmy Neutron. We start with Timmy, end with Timmy. Timmy is the only one with an ongoing conflict. Really, it's just Timmy needing to solve a problem and getting wrapped up with the Jimmy Neutron cast while trying to fix it. Jimmy having to see Fairy World isn't even set up until the halfway point. And even then, when it is set up, we have to cut back to Timmy, in which his problem pretty much starts, develops, and ends. All while we're meant to believe that Jimmy is just standing around in Fairy World with Crocker having small talk.
I think I'll take the VIP tour!
But been like 10 minutes, maybe you should have jumped a bit sooner. It's definitely one of those things where I think the cuts made between each show should have been made more frequently as the action rose. That way both of them are taking on their foes at the same time instead of Timmy saving the day right when Jimmy's conflict is getting started. Makes for this constant stop and start, and because of that I often forget about how much of the special is left after Timmy saves Goddard. It doesn't ruin it, but it makes it feel so much slower, and not nearly as grand as it could have been. But that's the issue you have to run into when both of these characters are dealing with completely disconnected problems. Either way, I still love this special, and I do get their thought process, even if I don't think it worked out too well. And with that, this Power Hour comes to a close.
Thanks, boy genius.
Don't mention it, average kid who no one understands.
I hate that line. This special was a massive success on all fronts. I showed it off in my Danny Phantom video, but it was one of the most watched programs on cable that week. Kids were in love with this, and I even recall my mum watching these with me when it would air. Around 5 million people watched this when it aired, not to mention the DVDs and VHS sales. Look, I got both of them. Sweet. And so it not only made sense for Nick to greenlight a sequel, with us receiving, only 1 year later, the follow-up that everybody was asking for. It's time for the Jimmy Timmy Power Hour 2, When Nerds Collide. Another Jimmy Timmy Power Hour? You know what that means. Another Flash game. Wait, okay, this one actually looks kind of fun. I think this is by far the most well-known of the Jimmy Timmy Power Hours. It's definitely the one that aired the most on Nickelodeon, and the one that I was most excited to see come on TV. Funnily enough, this is actually the piece of media that would most get me into art. I remember we had just gotten one of those cable boxes where you could pause and rewind the TV and record stuff, and so I would just sit for hours trying to pause on the perfect exact frames I'd want to draw, and then I'd hang them all around my room, wish I still had those. I think I threw them away at some point. Kids, keep your old art. Also, why are you watching this? Have you even seen one of these shows? This was the one that I was most interested in revisiting. I feel like I've begun seeing more and more people these days coming out of whatever sick, twisted cave they've crawled out of to say the Jimmy Timmy Power Hours aren't very good. What's wrong with you? With the first one, I can certainly see where people are coming from, even if I myself don't personally agree. You know, it's just one of those things where the creativity and concept are cool enough to forgive any issues I have towards piecing. You know, I'd much rather it feel long and drawn out rather than rushed and uneventful. And so I'm hoping the second can, at the very least, keep up the stakes from the first, while not feeling as if these could have been two entirely separate episodes. Right off the bat, was anybody else super sad to see they never bothered actually making a new intro for the second, instead just hastily slapping a 2 at the end? Oh my god, that died. I didn't talk about it last time, because I forgot. But the intro for the specials is solid. Again, I wish there were a different one for each of them, but I understand why they'd rather put that budget somewhere else. One thing I really hated though was the canned laughter in the audience. Come on guys, him turning the fucking boombox into a pig isn't that funny. Thankfully, the setup this time around gets into things way quicker, and I really love how they kept continuity between specials. You know, it's not a wacky mishap that also puts Timmy in the world of Jimmy Neutron this time around. Instead, Timmy actively wants to go there now, remembering it to be the only place in the universe where a girl actually likes him.
No girl in the universe would date me! Oh my gosh, it's that boy who talks to inanimate objects!
So Timmy and Jimmy both just so happen to be throwing a Friday the 13th dance on the same day. Uh-oh. And so each of them are now at war over who gets to take Cindy to the dance, which she is more than happy with.
Cindy, are you really gonna let those two guys fight over you?
I thought I might.
Girl, you are my hero.
You know, I always forget that Cindy has the same voice actress as Sandy from SpongeBob. Now that I think about it, it's probably the main reason why they put both these characters in Nicktoons Unite. It's one less paycheck. Anyways, I like how this special showcases a scenario in which Timmy, who lives in a very static world that mostly keeps itself episodic, is being thrown back into Jimmy's world, which has slightly changed since his last visit. See, at that point in time, Fairly OddParents was in its 4th season, while Jimmy Neutron was in its 2nd. And there was actually a pretty major break between the two Power Hours. Over a year and a half. And so the world of Jimmy Neutron, now well into its 3rd season, was a little different. As far as I'm aware, Jimmy Neutron offered slight hints of serialization, whereas Fairly OddParents would often have this in the case of changing the status quo of its secondary characters, like Remy Bucksaplenty losing his godparent or Mark Chang living on Earth as a human for a bit. Instead, Jimmy Neutron would change the dynamics between its cast, like Sheen and Libby getting together at a certain point. No idea how, I just look at them. You know, it's weird that she's never brought up in Planet Sheen. Also bugged me as a kid that that after the first couple episodes, Sheen acts like his friends on Earth don't exist, I always got really sad thinking about his Ultra Dad, whose son is now just missing. While looking that up, I find this Nicktoons forum from 2010 where they were, for some reason, speculating about this upcoming cartoon. I bet in the first half of the episode they will all be there. They'll be wishing Sheen goodbye and Libby will kiss Sheen and then he will head off. You poor, poor soul. This is what actually happens in the first half.
Anybody here? I think I left my Ultra Largo's Boom Boom card. Oh, there it is.
But one of those changes to the show was making Jimmy and Cindy more outwardly like each other. Despite being fierce rivals early on, they make it clear that she likes him and he likes her. Debbie Derryberry shares some truly horrifying ship art of the two on her Twitter. I mean, hey, at least it's not this.
Sticking out your yacht for the Rizzler. You're so skibidi. You're so Phantom Tax.
Okay, Jimmy Timmy Power Hour 2. I love that because of this setup, it actively pits the two of them against each other. You know, we get to see them fight, which was always the coolest part to me as a kid. It's interesting, despite exclusively watching Fairly OddParents when I was younger, I always wanted Jimmy to win, which obviously doesn't happen because Timmy is fucking overpowered and nobody questions how he gets his equipment so fast. But whatever, it's cool. Getting to see Timmy on his own rocket ship and having the two duke it out in the skies. And the dumbass sound effects they use are great.
Oh yeah? Bring it on!
I think what I hate about Timmy so much here is that he just acts so entitled all the time. It's like he never even registers this as an alternate universe, and just acts like it's another thing for him to fuck around with for a bit. Again, a result of them taking a character like Timmy who lives in an extremely exaggerated world, and plopping him in Jimmy Neutron where everyone is relatively normal.
Bye, Nerdtron! Have fun dancing with Sheen!
Again, I never watched Jimmy Neutron and didn't quite know all the characters' names yet, so I was always confused as to what the fuck he was saying here and thought he was going, have fun dancing with sheep, which really bewildered me as a kid. Timmy's attitude doesn't ruin it, although at times it borders on being too much, but I think they balance it well enough. Like last time because of Jimmy being so full of himself. You know, he's kinda asking for it. He only becomes so adamant about asking Cindy to the dance because someone else might take her instead. I liked that the one thing keeping Cindy from going to the dance with Jimmy is that he's an asshole, and I like that the one thing keeping Cindy from going to the dance with Timmy is potentially finding out he's a dumbass loser. This drama takes a backseat though, as we're once again introduced to the anti-fairies, with Anti-Cosmo trying to get his allies out of the fairy world prison. Something really strange to consider is that this special right here is only the second time the anti-fairies appeared in Fairly OddParents. After that first episode, they were locked away for 3 seasons. They're only in like 7 total episodes of that entire show after getting completely trashed in favor of Foop. Basically Butch Hartman's Stewie Griffin. He's seeking out someone from another universe to eat him and rescuing his friends, and gets just what he's looking for in Professor Calamitous, another main antagonist who rarely appears in the show itself. You know, it's like if Plankton was only in 5 episodes of SpongeBob, it's weird. After rescuing his friends and proceeding to immediately betray the professor, it's now up to Jimmy, Timmy, and friends to stop the anti-fairies from making every day Friday the 13th. Then they do that, and there's still 15 minutes left. Yeah, they didn't really fix that problem. Where as soon as one franchise's problem ends, then the other one begins. But it's not nearly as noticeable here because of Jimmy and Timmy constantly being with each other. It's not a case of us forgetting about one of them to instead focus on the other. Still, I like the story for this one a lot. And I enjoy that this special event series has its own continuity, feeling like it picks up right where the last left off, with Carl and Sheen continuing to call Timmy small-headed Jimmy, and Timmy's dad referencing the Buzz Adams outfit Timmy wore to get out of the test in the last one. Seeing Timmy wish for his parents to be rich supermodels though to impress Cindy reminded me of season 10 of The Fairly OddParents, where Chloe Carmichael, remember her, gives Timmy's dad a stock tip that makes him rich, something you think would just be a quick throwaway gag, but no, they continue to be millionaires throughout the rest of the show. Ugh. Also, barely mentioned them in the video so far, but Cosmo and Wanda are thankfully given much more to do this time. In the first because they were separated from Timmy for 95% of it, and again, all the Fairly OddParents stuff being dumped at the end. I usually forget about any contribution they had, but here that's not the case at all. Even if I do wish we got to see them interact more with Anti-Cosmo and Anti-Wanda. But the act of them involving these magical threats inherently gives them more agency on the matter. And being with Timmy allows them to actually make wishes this time. He even gives them over to Jimmy's friends at a certain point, which allows them to actually, you know, do stuff. We even get to see them come into Jimmy Neutron's world, where they're given their own 3D models. Why do they look better than the actual movie? I think what makes Cosmo and Wanda look so much better here is that they decided not to make their mouths protrude so much, making their expressions a lot easier to read compared to Timmy, whose mouth goes at this bizarre arc when opening too much. Now, the act of seeing these two worlds cross over is obviously going to have less impact compared to last time, simply through the act of just doing it again. But I think they do a good job here at expanding things from the last. Again, we get Cosmo, Wanda, and eventually Jorgen in the Jimmy world. Although for some reason Jimmy keeps calling him Jargon, I don't think they corrected Debbie on that.
Great! So all we have to do is keep Jargon angry. And
seeing all Jimmy's friends drawn in the Fairly OddParents style is fun too. I think I like Sheen the most, he's like a worm. This special does a much better job at switching dimensions more often. You don't feel like either show is getting more focus, it's the perfect combination. They also cut a lot more frequently at the start, which allows it not to come off too much like an extended Fairly OddParents episode, with Jimmy Neutron characters. I think Jorgen gets it the worst though, his model is atrocious. And it all comes down to the textures, I think. They already had a tough job adapting him to 3D with that chin especially. You know, I don't envy them having to do this or anything, but I'm just not a fan of the way they rounded him out, giving him these super flat textures looking like simple solid colors. It contrasts strangely against Professor Calamitus's wrinkles and liver spots and makes his expressions hard to notice. I think I like the way they handled it in the Attack of the Toybots video game a lot more, where they instead opted to curve his chin downwards. It's not as accurate, but who cares if it looks better? Something I started noticing in the writing, however, is that I actually vastly enjoy the Jimmy Neutron segments over the Fairly OddParents ones, and I think that's because Jimmy Neutron is just the naturally funnier show. Again, I want to know how they divided the work on this. Did the Jimmy Neutron team only write the Jimmy segments and the Fairly OddParents team only write the Fairly OddParents segments? This is the kind of thing I want to fucking know, Butch. The Fairly OddParents always feels like it has to come to a halt to remind you of when they're telling a joke, only to then hold on it for a few seconds until they're sure you understood. When I think the best jokes of that show were always the quicker, more fast-paced ones. The moments that would catch you off guard and move on to something else quickly while you were wondering what the fuck was just said. Now, I think that actually contributed to the show being as popular as it was, not in spite of it. I think the more slow way of storytelling where the characters are constantly stopping to describe what we're seeing on screen allowed it to be pretty universal. You know, you'd have to be a fucking idiot to not follow along. But I don't know, it makes certain episodes age a bit poorly in retrospect and feel a bit too kiddie. Dude, I don't know what to say, I can't watch this kid's cartoon because it feels too much like a kid's cartoon. Comparatively, Jimmy Neutron always had that faster pace and is pretty witty. Despite a lot of the characters being dumb, it never feels like the jokes they're making are.
Yo, I told you I'm coming too. Cindy's my girl.
And we have no lives, so count us in.
And because of that, I think The Adventures of Jimmy Neutron, boy genius, just holds up better as a funnier show. Blasphemy coming from this guy, I know. Maybe someday I'll actually have to sit down and marathon the series. I've only seen the first batch of episodes and most of the specials, which were great, like the Survivor parody and the one where Jimmy and Cindy get stranded on an island. It's a pretty short series too, having just a couple more episodes than Danny Phantom. So maybe I'll do a retrospective similar to that sometime, because I've enjoyed everything I've seen so far. Let me know if you'd want to see that. Thanks. So after the anti-fairies are defeated, Calamitus uses Jimmy's gene splicer to combine himself with Jorgen, in which he wants to use his Big Bang Bomb to destroy the world, which he will of course be safe from hiding under a desk. It's weird though that despite being one of his rare appearances on the show, they never chose to bring back Calamitus's main character trait, that being he never manages to finish anything he starts. That obviously makes for a less interesting villain, as you know his main weakness right from the get-go. But in a cartoon like this, I think there was room for some jokes to make out of that. Hell, even Nicktoons Unite brought that back for cutscenes. Either way, they steal Cindy and turn her into a hideous-looking fish. Gross. And so Timmy and Jimmy have got to finally team up to save the day. Their plan is pretty genius too. I like that it actually involves some established lore from the Fairly OddParents. That being that they're gonna break so many of the rules at once that Jorgen can't help but get angry and try to break free, giving them the perfect opportunity to unsplice them.
Been waiting all day to say this. I wish Timmy Turner was gone!
$20 says that line was originally, I wish Timmy Turner was dead, and the network made them change it, you know, God forbid a child learn of this concept in a less serious context. Little Billy, your grandmother just died. If only Jimmy Neutron had introduced me to this sooner. Either way, Jorgen breaks free and Calamitus is defeated. Now there's just one thing on everybody's mind.
Who are you going to the dance with, girl?
With that, Cindy finally comes to understand that Timmy isn't the genius he claimed to be, and Jimmy is still an asshole. And so as the perfect workaround, Jorgen helps the trio enter a polyamorous relationship, as they have an interdimensional dance party where they can dance with Cindy at the same time. his shiny teeth for some reason.
Hi, Mrs. Neutron.
God, I always forget that came from this episode. And with that, we end the second Jimmy Timmy Power Hour. I don't know, I still think it holds up pretty well. Sure, the older I get, the more I'm able to point out issues with it. Again, still having that problem of having two different villain plots that don't mesh well together at all because of their insistence on pulling that betrayal angle. But I don't think it hurts it. At least the Calamitous plan is by far the more evil, you know, wanting to murder everyone. And so I think it's a fine escalation after the anti-fairies are defeated, especially after he's been pretty much treated as a joke the entire time. Honestly, I wouldn't really change a thing about it. It's the perfect blend of Fairly OddParents and Jimmy Neutron. I mean, you barely even notice how Jimmy dominant this series is, given the nature of the Fairly OddParents. Timmy has friends, sure, but not nearly as closely as Carl or Sheen are to Jimmy. Same with love interests like Cindy, you know, I think it would be weird to try and shove AJ, Chester, or Trixie into this kind of thing, because they're not constants in Timmy's world. They focus more often than not solely being on Cosmo and Wanda. And so I think they did as good a job as they could have here at balancing both shows at once. In my opinion, it's pretty fantastic. And viewers only seem to agree as this special managed to do even better than the first, reaching 5.5 million viewers. You wouldn't think it as Butch almost never talks about the other two, but I think that's more so a result of him not being involved in the writing process of this one, and so it's much harder for him to take credit for something he didn't have as much involvement in. But again, this is the one Nick would air most of all on TV. I always saw this on. You know, I remember only seeing it once as a kid, went years without watching it again, then saw they were going to be airing it the same day I had Gaelic football practice, which is pretty much just soccer and rugby mixed together. And I didn't even fucking like doing it, look at me. My parents were forcing me to do it, but I begged, I pleaded, to please let me miss that one lesson as I just really wanted to watch the Jimmy Timmy Power Hour 2. And you know what they said? No. So I was sad. I think this was the peak of the Fairly OddParents in popularity. I wouldn't say the same about Jimmy, as nothing can top the amount of hype Nick were putting into the movie, but maybe the peak for the TV series. But in regards to Fairly OddParents, this is definitely when they were pumping the most into that show. Season 4 is when they were giving it their all in general. They were riding high off the success of Abracatastrophe, a special I would love to talk about on a longer level sometime because I actually think it's one of the weaker Fairly OddParents events. But it was so popular that it led to Nick giving them fucking specials galore. Season 4 not only had a couple of 22-minute events like Shelf Life or the Big Superhero Wish, but in that one season, we got the first Jimmy Timmy Power Hour, School's Out the Musical, which is fantastic, but also Channel Chasers, what many believe to be the absolute peak of that show. I know some folks have started to disagree with that statement, which I'd argue is simply a result of the kids who grew up with the later seasons getting old enough to voice their opinions online. But anyways, the main claim is that the ending wouldn't work as a series finale as it shows Timmy to be a bad parent, just like his, learning nothing from his experience and giving his kids an evil babysitter too. But like, that's the whole fucking point. It's meant to be a full circle kind of moment. The whole special builds up to this idea that upon Timmy giving up Cosmo and Wanda, all his bad memories went along with them. They changed his life for the better and gave him nothing but a completely pleasant memory of his childhood, shown through the conversation he has with Alec Baldwin. Alec Baldwin. Because of this, he has no memory of how evil Vicky was, or how neglectful his parents were. And upon growing up, his childhood sensibilities went away as well, clearly shown through him looking at the photo of his childhood self, looking at his now normal fish, and it bringing him genuine happiness for a reason he just can't understand, before getting distracted by his newfound adult responsibilities. It's the perfect bittersweet end of that series, and I don't really understand this strange revisionism, where it's actually bad on the most surface level. Okay, wait, what's this video about? Season 4 was hard to top, is my point. And it wasn't topped. Season 5 had a lot of great episodes, and of course it contained the amazing second Jimmy Timmy Power Hour, along with later having the third, even having Fairly Idle, which I think is pretty underrated. Okay, I'm just realizing now, I should just make a video sometime about every Fairly OddParents special, there we go. But the point, again, is, from here, the Fairly OddParents went on a slow decline, with Nickelodeon deciding that the series, along with Jimmy Neutron, would be coming to a close, choosing to end things out on one final hurrah. The Jimmy Timmy Power Hour 3. So let's take a look and see if it would have been a satisfying end to either show. You know, for years I've been looking for this Fairly Odd Parents fishbowl. I couldn't believe it was real, but like, you know, no duh, of course it would. It's the most obvious merchandise to make from that show. I had just accepted for years that I was never gonna own it. I mean, who the fuck keeps their 20-year-old cheap-ass plastic fishbowl laying around? But then a couple weeks back, I saw it on eBay, complete in box. Fucking mashed that buy button. I had to get it. Also find the matching glow-in-the-dark gravel that goes along with it, and got ready to have my own Cosmo and Wanda. Then I posted a picture of it to Twitter, and everybody begged me not to put a fish in it. Apparently small bowls aren't good for them. So the Jimmy Timmy Power Hour 3.
The final chapter?
Run, you idiots!
Jimmy Timmy 3 the Jerkinator. Catch it again tomorrow at 8, only on Nick.
I mentioned it before, but the release schedule for this was insane. Coming out in July of 2006, only around half a year after the last, which means both of them were bound to be in production at the same time for a period. I guess Nickelodeon saw the success of the first and figured they could make this a regular event as long as both shows were still on the air. Both of them were cancelled that same year. This is often seen as the weakest Jimmy Timmy Power Hour, and so I'm curious to see if my thoughts on it have changed much, because I loved this one as a kid. I really love how low the stakes are at the beginning. Jimmy is just looking through other dimensions and stumbles upon Timmy, who's just been rejected by all two of his friends, Chester and Edge.
Those guys are practically my only friends in this universe. You know what that means?
You should be a better person!
With this, he has the bright idea to once again head to Retroville to meet up with Cindy Vortex. And so it's another battle of bringing versus average to see who can get to her house first.
Timmy will be just an average kid who no one understands.
Somebody should write a song about that!
That line sucks. They don't focus on this for too long though, as they soon find out Cindy isn't even home. And so what are they gonna do?
Wanna hang out?
Are you nuts? Have you gone completely mental? You want to hang out with me, the two of us together?
Maybe.
Okay, sure.
If this was the first Power Hour, I probably wouldn't have liked how quickly they just become buddies here, but honestly, after 2 hours of them endlessly bickering with each other, I'm down for it. Enough time has passed with the two interacting for me to find it kind of charming that they're so quick to let bygones be bygones. Feels true to how actual kids are. There's no real goal set up this time, all Timmy wants to do is hang out with someone, and so I like that the plot here is almost meta in a sense. They've saved their worlds on multiple occasions, and the act of running into each other isn't nearly as epic as it once was, and so it's fitting that this special has a pretty laid-back feeling to it. They're just looking for something to do.
Jimmy and Timmy are friends? Do you know what this means? Do you? Do you?
Whereas the others felt like they took a little long to get to the point, this one just beelines directly towards it. It only takes 2.5 minutes for Jimmy and Timmy to run into each other. And they don't even give a shit when Cindy does come back. They've finally come to understand bros before hoes.
I'm like catnip to those boys.
They poop on you in a box?
That's kitty litter, you idiot!
Gross. Honestly, they're kind of sadistic this time around. They both start teaming up to beat their respective lower-tier villains, and realize how overpowered they are when together. Jimmy cancels out Cosmo and Wanda's rules with his science, and Timmy's magic can assist Jimmy's inventions in ways he couldn't normally accomplish. It feels like this was when they wanted to insert the most fan service into these. It's really cool getting to see them casually just tackle Jimmy's foes and seeing Timmy riding along in the Robo-Walker. And it's sweet having them go inside a Crimson Chin comic and seeing Jimmy get his own superhero alter ego.
I hate the new Jimmy-Timmy friendship.
Damn, so close. They get bored pretty quick though. It's like playing GTA on God mode. It's not as fun as you think. And so what do they do to counteract this? Well, they're gonna create their own supervillain, played by the carrot from Daddy Daycare, alright. It's fucked up, they're literally creating life just for the purpose of being able to torture it. And torture it they do. By accidentally giving it emotions, he's actually a pretty swell guy. And as a result, Jimmy and Timmy frustratedly try to beat the meanness into him. Problem is, they've accidentally made him adaptable. And so after long enough of screwing with him, he does become evil, now with the ability to steal their powers and use it against them. It's so fucked up, this is the nicest guy in the world. He gets fucked over by them twice and is still willing to forgive them, in which they just ditch him again, what the fuck? It may seem lame to have a meet-up villain, you know, instead of pulling from another set from each show. But it works in my opinion. I mean, who else were they going to use as a threat here? Vicky? Beautiful Gorgeous? Maybe they could have gone full meta and had the villains be Butch Hartman and John Adidas. Or even, you know, the Nickelodeon executives. What if the plot was the ultimate fuck you, and it was about Timmy and Jimmy teaming up to stop their shows from being cancelled? ending with Jimmy dying at the end and only Timmy living on. Okay, wait, that's just the ending to Sonic Adventure 2. But also, having one bad guy seriously helps the pacing. Instead of having a fear-giving one show's bad guy the spotlight over the other, they're able to focus solely on the new guy, helping that stop-and-go issue I felt the previous two specials slightly suffered from. It's also really apparent that he was designed as a Fairly OddParents character first. He looks atrocious in the Jimmy Neutron style. He only appears in that world for like 10 seconds total, but you can see that exact same texture and lighting issue on him, it's awful. Also, I mentioned how ridiculous having someone like Vicky as a villain would be here, but then I was immediately reminded of how there are actually more than 3 Jimmy Timmy Power Hours. Yeah, that's right, the Nickelodeon magazine, which was running at the same time, actually decided to have a couple of their own crossover events between the two characters. We have the Jimmy Timmy plus Vicky Cower Hour, which sees Wanda and Cosmo leave for a fairy reunion, with Timmy being stuck with Vicky all by himself. Coincidentally, though, Jimmy Neutron steps out of Timmy's trash can, in which he's seeking out Cosmo and Wanda to use their magic to help him with an invention. With them gone, however, he instead decides to use a spare X-Boy Gamebox controller, yes, that's really what it's called, to invent a behavior modifier to make her nicer. When they get tricked, however, they have to think like kids instead of relying on magic or science, and so spray her down with shaken up soda bottles. And that's it. What fun! Another sees Timmy and Jimmy pit science versus magic. I like how this one keeps Jimmy in his own art style since they're still in his universe. That was a neat touch. Gimmick this time is Jimmy has to use magic and Timmy has to use science. Doesn't work out well. Finally, we have Dimension Intervention, my personal favorite. I love the implication here that Jimmy and Timmy just continue to hang out in each other's universes off screen, or after doing it so much they begin noticing certain elements from their worlds intertwining. Hugh looks more like Timmy's dad, Crocker is now his teacher, he finds out his name is now Jimmy Turner and he's got giant buck teeth. It gets super wild by the end with the entire Nickelodeon multiverse colliding, all the Nicktoons start invading before Jimmy manages to reset everything, in which we later learn the same thing was happening to Timmy too. Even makes a fun little nod to SpongeBob at the end. Why did this have to be a 2-page comic? Why couldn't we ever get that fabled Nicktoons movie? It writes itself. These comics are fun. Obviously not a substitute for watching the specials or anything, but I don't know, I think there was an opportunity here to animate some of these. Maybe play them as bumpers like they used to do with the Jimmy Neutron shorts. They'd only be like 30 seconds each, who cares? Okay, back to the third one. Chester and AJ are here too. Not sure why. Obviously, it's to feed into the lesson by the end of Jimmy and Timmy learning not to take advantage of their friends. But they just don't do much. Feels like their only reason for being here was to balance the Jimmy-Timmy characters a bit more. But really, it's kind of weird to see them go on an adventure like this. I think it's the only time in the entire show where they've ever gotten involved in the action. I don't like AJ here especially, they've boiled him down to a single joke. They begin by establishing he's about to freeze himself to be unfrozen in the future, but Chester wakes him up right after. So uh-oh, he thinks he's in the future. And so every single line involving AJ has to have that gag. He just keeps repeating how the future is weird, or the future, it's the same as his time, isn't that so weird? And everyone lets this continue until the very last quarter where Libby just tells him he never went to the future. And he believes her immediately. They could have just done that at any point in time. You're great. Also, spoilers, but by the end, the villain who they later dubbed Shirley, which he then takes back and renames himself the villain whose name isn't Shirley, turns Cosmo and Wanda into humans, in which Chester and AJ never questioned who these random tiny adults hanging out with them are. Huh.
Not everybody who has a mustache is evil. Your mother has a mustache. You should give him a mustache.
And a remote.
Look, it's that one funny reaction image. Are you reacting yet? Wait, why does the lighting look so good here? Also, might I say, they just look abysmal in the Jimmy Neutron style as well. The bright pink lips on AJ are questionable at best, and Chester's giant fucking overbite, while accurate, looks horrible when translated to 3D. It really does seem like both of their models were pretty rushed. This all hints at something greater, which I'm sure I'm not the first person to point out, but the Timmy to Jimmy ratio in this special fucking sucks. We span maybe 5 collective minutes in Jimmy World, and the rest is all Fairly OddParents. It's so mundane too, there are so many friends in this one that they don't have anything for them to do. It's so focused on Timmy and Jimmy that all we get for them are scene after scene of them just sitting around talking about Timmy and Jimmy. It's all these guys have going on in their lives. Their entire subplot revolves around trying to have fun without the supposed centers of the universes, I guess. I'm also not a fan of what they do with Jimmy later on either, as when the villain whose name isn't Shirley learns about his adapting abilities, you know, I guess you could call him his adaptability. He steals Cosmo and Wanda's magic like I mentioned before, but also Jimmy's intelligence, now putting Jimmy somewhere below Cosmo's IQ somehow. But all that means is for the rest of the special, Jimmy is not acting like himself and near useless, just another Cosmo.
Now he's a villain and a genius! Just like Dr. Phil!
I wouldn't have minded that much if this obstacle wasn't present the entire rest of it. He never even gets it back by the end. I guess the canonical end to Jimmy Neutron is him becoming a dumbass. We've truly come full circle. Anyways, I can't imagine the intent was to have it lean so heavily in the Fairly OddParents' favor. I think it was sadly just a result of circumstances outside of their control. See, by the end, Shirley... Sorry, I apologize for dead naming. The villain, whose name isn't Shirley, decides he's gonna suck everybody from both universes into this white void where they'll all be forced to hang out with him, even deciding to suck in objects from the two dimensions. All of these objects, however, appear in the Fairly OddParents style, most being pretty lazily done too, like Jimmy's lab looks fucking stupid. They took everything from a front-facing angle when that's rarely how they're approached in the show. It's sad because I get what they were going for. They wanted it to be a blend of 2D and 3D. We're seeing the 2D Fairly OddParents characters on a 3D plane. That's a great idea. I just think we were missing more from Jimmy Neutron other than just being 3D. The issue of the Jimmy style barely appearing would have been mitigated if these objects appearing in this world were 3D models. Honestly, if they really wanted to do something special for this finale, even though it probably would have taken more work than they had the time or budget for, but this should have been an expansion on that ending from the original where they shake hands. We should have seen all the Jimmy Neutron characters in 3D interacting with the Fairly OddParents characters in 2D. That would have blew people's fucking minds, mine at least. I wonder if maybe that was the original plan and got scrapped at one point. But even then, it's not bad. Also gives them the opportunity to give some of the tertiary cast a moment to interact, which they've never really done yet, like Timmy and Jimmy's parents. And I enjoy that moment where the villain, whose name isn't Shirley, starts matching up different character archetypes. That was fun. I also have to wonder if the reason they lessened the amount of CG here was because of the increased production going on at DNA Productions, the studio who animated Jimmy Neutron. Around this time, they were also working on The Ant Bully, the film that would go on to pretty much bankrupt them. But it actually came out in the exact same month as Jimmy Timmy 3, and so perhaps working on that and finishing their final order of Jimmy Neutron episodes was stretching them thin. Maybe they just couldn't find the time. Again, which sucks because after the 16-minute mark, there is only maybe 30 seconds of total CG in the rest of the episode. That short bit with the villain whose name isn't Shirley, and the very last shot. Something else I noticed here is that the writing seems way closer in style to the Fairly OddParents this time around. Again, it's interesting to see these specials and how much each show changed between them. Like Cosmo and Wanda bickering way more this time around, it's half their goddamn lines. It's not at that point of being unbearable yet, it's still somewhat funny, but I don't know, they really could not stop toning that down. Still though, what I think puts this special above the first in my opinion, despite the lower stakes, is the comedy. This is by far the funniest out of the three. What it lacks in epicness, it more than makes up for by just having better gags.
I don't have any... That's not mine. That's not me.
It's just brought down by, again, having that Fairly OddParents problem where all the characters are way too simple. Everyone only talks about Timmy and Jimmy. The two of them are complete assholes and don't realize they're neglecting their friends, but have that big sappy turnaround where they say how much they care about them. Even the ending is pretty forced too, with the two of them apologizing to the long name guy. But like, they only feel bad because he's about to destroy their universes.
See? Now you respect me, because I'm a threat.
Either way, their plan here is actually pretty smart, with them manipulating him into removing his weapons by forcing him into situations that would cause him to adapt them away. He now lives in Dimsdale, which will never be brought up again, and with that, the Jimmy Timmy Power Hour 3 comes to a close. Jimmy's still a dumbass. And grabby, apparently. While I can see folks not liking this one as much due to it not being as cool or epicular, I think it more than makes up for it by just being fun. Again, we've had 2 hours of high-stakes situations. We've seen Jimmy save Timmy's world and Timmy save Jimmy's world. Them ending out in a fun romp of the two finally getting along and realizing how destructive they can be when putting their minds together, only to be stripped of their most powerful assets, is a cool idea. Even if going all out on a giant finale would have been sweet. Honestly, I didn't even consider that. It's really weird we never got to see that calamitous Crocker team up. That makes way too much sense. You know, mad scientist and third grade teacher. There's no viewer amount for this special, at least not readily available online like the other two, but I have to imagine it did similarly, if not a little worse than the last. They were so close that each show was still relatively as popular, but also so close that I'm sure there wasn't as much spectacle around the event, which is evident by how subdued the commercials are, not treating this nearly as cool as the last two. And with that, Jimmy Neutron and the Fairly OddParents were cancelled. Nickelodeon had just switched CEOs at the time, and I'm sure they were looking to spark some new life into the network. Also, again, DNA Productions had went bankrupt around that same time. Not that it would directly result in Jimmy getting cancelled or anything, but I'm sure to them the hassle of trying to find a new CG animation company in the mid-2000s who could adapt to the show quickly would have been way more of a headache compared to just greenlighting something new. At least then they can create some marketing buzz around a new series. Then they tried to bring it back 4 years later, and everybody hated it. Then they brought it back for a car commercial. Wait, why does this look better than the actual show?
What else can your dimensional thingamalyzer change, Jimmy?
Well, what the fuck was he gonna do? Which really sucks because apparently they had some pretty big plans for the series' potential 4th season, which included fully leaning into the serialization. Evil Jimmy would have returned, Jimmy and Cindy would become an official couple. Their ideas sounded extremely ambitious and their natural evolution for the series. You know, too bad though. You get the ant bully. On the other side, Nickelodeon also cancelled Fairly OddParents, which Butch claimed to be a result of SpongeBob being more successful. Which I can't imagine being fully accurate. I'm sure that was a factor, but I also think they could have just thought the series had run its course. It had 80 episodes and like 5 TV movies, time to call it a day and move on to something new. But then, Butch had a genius idea. Let's add a baby. Yeah, Butch decided to drudge up an idea he had planned for the also cancelled Fairly OddParents theatrical film, which had a finished script I wish I could read someday, and which he planned for it to end with the godparents having a kid. And that seemed to be just what Nick were looking for to rejuvenate interest in the show. And with that, it continued to run. For a little bit longer, in which they cancelled it again. And so Butch had a genius idea. Let's add a dog. And then it got cancelled again. Point being, Fairly OddParents stuck around, which is both fortunate and unfortunate. Fortunate because, well, I liked the Fairly OddParents. Poof wasn't that bad. But also unfortunate because it's hard not to deny that Jimmy Neutron deserved it more. They had an actual plan, a story they wanted to tell, and so it's sad that the show that got to continue was the one that went on to just throw shit at the wall and see what stuck. Who knows if Nick will ever try to revive Jimmy Neutron again? The voice cast have been advocating for it for years, and I'm sure we'll see something eventually. Certainly as we're approaching the 2000s nostalgia era. But if not, I hope fans of it can take solace in knowing that the show ended while it was still good. Imagine being in my shoes. The Jimmy Timmy Power Hour trilogy isn't perfect. You know, I'm not the first to admit that. At the same time, I think all 3 of these still managed to be great in spite of their issues. For whatever problems I can talk about regarding pacing or the eventual imbalance of crossing over the 2 shows, nothing will ever change the fact that these events will go down as some of the most monumental moments in Nickelodeon history, doing something completely unheard of at the time and pushing the boundaries for what to expect from a kids network. Nickelodeon from this era just felt like they got it. They knew exactly what would have you on the edge of your seat as a kid. And for that, I'll always look back on these specials fondly. You know, I got to the end of this video and realized I never actually showed off this fucking Fairly OddParents fishbowl. So look, here it is. The box, not in the best condition, you know, it's not perfect or anything, but I fucking got the whole thing put together. Again, I find the fucking gravel that has the poof on it. Glows in the dark, apparently. I never get to test it. They got the castle, all of it. I even bought this little fucking plant thing to match how it looks in the show. And then, right after I get it all put together, don't put a fish in it. So, great. All wasted. And I spent way too much on this to not put a fish in it. So I guess I will just... Oh, that's... Okay, look. It came with these little Cosmo and Wanda, like, things that are attached. So I guess... if I want, I can just, look, they're kind of broken too. I can just stick these in it, and then it's still like I get Cosmo and Wanda in a fishbowl. I guess that will do. But also, speaking of dumbass products I impulsively buy, look at this. It's a Nickelodeon bowling bag ball, or bowling ball bag, and I was like, oh, fucking bowling ball. I love bowling. I love the Knuckles show. So I was like, of course I'm gonna get the Fairly OddParents bowling ball, and then I can like do a short or something where I like bowl with it. But then look at this. It looks sweet, but if you were to notice anything, it doesn't even have fucking holes in it. What? That's the whole fucking point. You're meant to bowl with it, so just a waste. Great.
Sticking out your yacht for the Rizzler. You're so skibidi. You're so Phantom Tax. I just wanna be your Sigma. Freaking come here. Give me your Ohio. Gotta what?